my job is kind of to introduce UKPSF to some of the people who don't know what it is, and say what we've been doing a little bit. So UK Plant Science Federation was set up some 4 years ago, November 2011 it was formed. And its role was really to represent, as it says on the posters these days, a single voice of plant science. Plant science was naturally fragmented into the pathologists, the foresters, the cereal breeders, and actually by bringing everyone together, the idea is to have a more effective voice to funding agencies, to legislation, and to regulation and things that will benefit plant science in the UK and I guess worldwide. Okay, so I guess we wanted to formulate a strategy and a vision of where plant science should go in the UK, and we'll talk a lot more about that later on. Improve the general funding environment, obviously that's something that's close to everyone's heart. Provide a focused contact point for UK plant science. I think we've achieved that. Support an effort to educate and train the next generation of plant scientists, which I think is of fundamental importance to all of us. The UKPS has grown from an initial conception to an organisation that has 30 member organisations participating in it. And that really does represent the whole of plant science, from academics through learning societies to industry. And not only that, it goes from agriculture, crop growth in the field, agronomy, forestry, environmental biodiversity, through to molecular biology and systems biology. And I know I've left people out, I'm sorry. I need to be inclusive, I can't remember everyone off there. Okay, so, and as we've heard this morning, I don't need to remind anyone in this audience the global challenges that face mankind in terms of feeding people, but also while maintaining a diverse biosphere and capable of supporting life. And I think that's something we really do need to worry about. It would be miserable, I think, and probably unsustainable if it was just humanity and its farm animals and plants left on this planet. So I guess as plant scientists, the talks this morning have been great, actually, because they summarise the whole diversity of things that we are challenged by. We face amazing challenges, the stability of our climates, which we have relied on, and I think people forget that. The stability of climate has allowed human population to grow. The destabilisation of that climate is a real threat to that population. And those plants, as has been talked about, we bred them for those climates. It is difficult always to predict, but what we do know is that when climate changes, and if climate changes, it will take time for the plant science community to respond to those changes, because it's never quick to adapt crop plants to new environments and new changes. And so we actually have to think ahead and move now for those goals, and I think that's a big challenge. And the other one, I guess, is the one that we've talked about quite a bit now. The ash dieback is a good example of a nice island we live on. We used to be able to protect that island because we could stop things coming in and protect ourselves from diseases. But with extensive travel and global free trade agreements, those barriers to protection of those have largely been broken down. And so we're not able to protect the island in the same way. So we're going to face new threats, new novel diseases we have to respond to. And again, as Richard was just saying, how long to actually regenerate resistant ash trees in this country to the disease that's here, let alone the disease that might be coming, are quite challenging tasks. And what they require, and is something that UKPSF bangs on about, is a long-term, stable strategy for funding this science and expounding the science that underpins it at all levels, be it from fundamental science through to application, through to developing protocols for the use in the field. Okay, so, and finally, I guess the compound of all these problems is growing by the reduction of growing resistance to agrochemicals and the potential withdrawal of certain chemistries that have been going on, as we talked about again this morning. Okay, so what's UKPSF been doing? Last year we launched this report here, Current State and Future Challenges. I'm sure you've all read it. If you haven't, there are copies outside for you to pick up. It's extremely well received and has been really quite influential in many circles, I think. Crucially, from this document, we got six recommendations. One of them is that we need to inspire a new generation of plant scientists. Many of us are aging, and we need to have a sort of resurgence of the feeling that got many of us into plant science in the 1970s. Had to think then. And what those things was, kind of a world oil energy crisis, food shortages on the planet, and it's almost like a rerun of those times again to me today. And what I am pleased to see is that many young people are responding to that, actually seeing that it's a valuable career to go on and make a difference to the world in that way, rather than just being medics. And so I think that would be a very good success if that's true. So education and training, they must need to meet the needs of the employers. This is critical. If those people are going to have careers, they will come in because they're motivated. They need careers in that. So the training that's provided must meet the needs of the employers. Okay. Regulatory frameworks need to be more evidence-based and risk-based and transparent, enabling of innovation. Effective translation of plant science into applications is crucial. Stability of funding, which I've mentioned before, is essential for long-term survival of the research area. And we would obviously demand, or wish for increased investment in the area of plant science. Okay, so we did the report, and then at a meeting like this last year, we got a lot of feedback on that report. And from that, we took forward 4 areas of it for developing. And so through from middle to the end of last year, we were working on 4 new working groups we put together to take forward those areas, because we need to make actions on these, not just more documents for people to read. And so those 4 areas were training and skills, translation, regulation, and funding. Okay? And those come out of the recommendations. And these groups reported to the AGM at the end of last year, and the 4 people here will talk more about that now. So the final shape of these working groups, as I say, was developed in a meeting in York last year. So discussion was highly useful to UK PSF, because this is what we like about this. This is your opportunity to really express your views. And so I really will encourage you to be free and open in the discussions and just let things rip, right? Because we want as much feedback as we can, and as much more ideas will allow us to formulate the future. Okay, so I've said enough, and to chair this session, I'm delighted to introduce Anthea McIntyre. Anthea is elected to represent people of West Midlands region in the European Parliament in December 2011 and was re-elected in 2014. She is Conservative Party spokesman on employment, as well as the coordinator of the Employment Committee in the European Parliament. Anthea also serves on the Agriculture Committee and wrote a report, The Future of Europe's Horticulture Sector Strategies for Growth, which was adopted by the European Parliament in 2014. So delighted you could come, Anthea, and I'll hand over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Jim. I've got here that I can do a brief introduction, no more than 4 minutes, but I do want to say how delighted I am to be here today, and how much plant science and what it has to contribute is very important to me, and I have to say to the whole of Europe, and is something that fortunately the European Parliament is interested in. Briefly, when I joined the Parliament, I felt that horticulture was very important in my part of the world, which is down in Herefordshire, and I wanted to get across that there is more to horticulture than citrus growing in the Mediterranean and bulbs in Holland, that in the UK we have a very important role to play, and I wanted Europe to know about it. So that's what I tried to get across in producing this report. If anyone wants a copy, you can find one on my website, or I'll send you one if you would like it. I think that plant sciences are absolutely central to food security, and it's food security that actually gets people's, and particularly politicians' interest across the globe. We know that by 2050, the world population will be something like 9.5 billion, and we need to increase food production by about 70% to feed everybody. So there's quite a challenge there. So we need to increase yields, but we need to have less environmental impact. We need to reduce food waste. We need to adapt to climate change. We need to tackle the pests and diseases. And I think that it's hugely important that we invest in research and development. So we've got in the UK, the government investing 160 million over 5 years in agri-tech. That's important. But we've also got the European programme of Horizon 2020, which for the first time includes agriculture. And there we've got 80 billion euros over 7 years. And one of the interesting things, I think, about Horizon 2020 is its demand for practical application. So this isn't just pie-in-the-sky research. This is going to result in something useful, practical, that can make a difference. And that's why I kind of really believe in it. Another aspect from Europe is we need a better view of legislation. We need better regulation. We need legislation that is risk-based, that is scientific evidence-based. At the moment, there is far too much of the precautionary principle and hazard-based decisions, and so everything gets banned automatically. I was very pleased that I was able to write specifically about endocrine disruptors and got it published in the Westminster House magazine. And this is saying, you know, if we treated everything, if we treated household products such as bleach in the same way as we treat the plant protection products, they would be banned because, you know, bleach, if you use it as you're supposed to clean your house, it's fine. If you drink it, it's poisonous. So it's a hazard. But can you imagine if we banned it automatically, we're no longer able to use bleach at all because of the potential hazard if you drank it? Now, we've got to, I think, have a much more sensible view about how we view plant protection products and how we expect farmers particularly to manage. We know that since 2001, we've lost more than half the active substances approved in the EU, and Anderson's report recently predicted there are about another 40 to be lost for any time soon. So that, I think, is hugely important. The other area is skills, and that's already been touched on. And we need plant pathologists, we need biologists, we need botanists, we need agronomists. We've got to make those professions attractive. And I think as a whole, we have to make the sector more attractive to the young people that are going into it. I hear terrible anecdotal evidence of school children being taken maybe to a farm and told, if you don't pass your exams, that's what you'll be doing. And that's horrendous. We need our young people to recognise that there are skilled, rewarding, high-level jobs and careers to be had in the whole of the agri-tech, for want of a better word, area. And that particularly, we need plant scientists. If you want to save the world, you don't have to be a doctor. If you can become a plant scientist and actually ensure that we can all be fed, you're doing a great job. So this is the message that I actually try and get out when I go and speak to schools, because one of the things that I think this country has got very badly wrong is its careers service. So, but we won't go down that too much of a diversion. So I was very pleased when I scanned this report. I can't claim to have read it, every page of it, but I was hugely impressed because I think it's exactly saying the things that I believe in. So I'm delighted that we've got the panel here today that are going to talk to us on the 4 different working groups that UKPSF have had in progress. So I'm going to introduce each of them, and then each of them are going to sort of tell us in no more than 5 minutes what they've been doing. And then we want to throw it open so that we get some good question and answers going. So For the training and skills working group, we have Simon Leather, and his sort of brief is how do we inspire a new generation of plant scientists and ensure that education and training meets the need of industry and employers. We have Rick Mumford, who's doing the translation working group, and how do we enable effective translation of plant science research into applications. We have Huw Jones on the regulation working group on how do we facilitate the creation of regulatory frameworks that are evidence and risk-based, transparent and enabling of innovation. This is really close to my heart. Although your agenda will tell you that you've got Elizabeth Wareham, we haven't. We've actually got Stephan Kepinsky from the University of Leeds, and he's going to talk about the funding working group and how do we increase investment in plant science and create a stable funding strategy in the long term. So those are the 4 groups, and they each are going to tell you a bit about what they've been doing, what they've been finding, and then we'll throw it open. So Simon, over to you.
So basically, just to reiterate what Jim and Anthea have said, we wanted to, how do we inspire a new generation of plant scientists and ensure that education and training meets the needs of industry and the employers? So we had a large working group covering a range of plant scientists, some that were newly hatched, through to old greybeards like myself who suddenly realized they'd been 40 years in the job. And we also covered a range of skills from people who were very molecular to people like myself again, who wouldn't know a molecule if you threw them at them, but have been involved in whole organism applied research for a very long time. And also people who I would consider to be plant scientists, botanists like Jonathan Mitchley, to people like myself who are sort of crop protection specialists, so working on the organisms that attack plants. So between us we had a lot of views and a lot of opinions, but we came up with a vision. And our vision, I think this is help you think about discussions, was that we felt that every young person should be engaged in some plant-based scientific inquiry throughout their compulsory science education. We felt that every post-16 learner in the general area of biology should have been introduced to the range of opportunities that studying plants can bring them. We felt that teachers at all levels needed to be better supported so that they could bring their expertise and enthusiasm to the people they're teaching. We wanted to see more plant scientists going into professional teaching to help with that vision, and that researchers should be engaging with schools doing outreach. And that, as Anthea said, careers in plant science should be seen as attractive and something that's actually attainable and going to help you make a living. And because we're told that and we agree that this is a very vulnerable skill area, that plant science employers and research organizations should actually help in this outreach to say, look, here we are, let's get involved, this is where you can work. And we also would love to see HEIs, the higher education institutes, actually having a clear strand of plant science in their biology degree so that people don't just do it piecemeal, they actually see this is how it works, there is progression. And we would dearly love to see funded places available to help this key area. And we want to make sure, we would hope, that people involved in producing plant scientists are actually producing plant sciences that are fit for purpose. And finally, of course, we feel that we need to have a high visibility in the media, online. We need to be out there and showing our stuff. So how do we do this? Well, this is our sort of 4 main recommendations and areas of further progress. We think we need to have a review of the UK's plant science training and skills capabilities and requirements. What do we need? What do we do? We feel that we need to have an online interactive resource that can help disseminate this information to the people out there who need to know about this. We need to make sure that in degree courses, plant science degree courses, plant science should be represented in all biology degrees. And those courses that actually have a nice coherent thread of plant sciences, we need some way of highlighting this so that those people wanting to study can actually see, yes, this is where we should go. And in progress already, the UK PSF are doing this, We're already developing an online plant science outreach toolkit to encourage and equip plant scientists to actually get out there and spread the message. And talking about spreading the message, this is what we want: a better future for plant science, wider awareness, deeper engagement, greater impact. And it was very refreshing to see in our working group that almost everybody in the working group was already out there tweeting and doing other things. And in fact, a number of us already have websites and blogs where we're actually trying to do this and get our message out already. So this is just so you can see some of the things that people are doing from our working group. Okay, and that's me.
So now we're going to have Rick Mumford talking about the translation working group.
I'm here to represent the translation working group. And as Jim mentioned, it was one of the key recommendations that came out of the UK PSF report, so I won't read that out to you. But the first thing we started doing was looking at a definition of translation. Translation is often quite a complicated thing, and people have their own definition. So this is the definition that we were working to. So this is the translation of basic plant science to real-world applications through new or improved practices, products, and services. So this is the idea of taking things across the infamous valley of death. So where you have scientists on one side and practitioners, end users on the other side, and how can you get across that tricky divide? Another way to possibly look at it is this idea of technology readiness levels that came out of NASA, and this idea that you have your basic science, if you like, your discovery science at the bottom, and how you then move up that technology readiness levels towards technology readiness level 9, which in NASA parlance would be launching into space. For us, that would be new products. And I think what we're very good at in the UK is the sort of bits down the bottom, 1 to 2, 3, 4. But what we're not so good at is the other bits in between. So we started off with a discussion about some of the barriers to translation of plant science, and this just shows in the blue boxes were some of the specific comments that were made, and I'm not going to particularly highlight those, apart from that one in the bottom left corner, which is academic mistrust of commercial organisations. As an organisation that left government on the 31st of March, I can vouch for that one. Yes. So. If you distill all that down into three key areas, you can summarise it as there are processes around the barriers around funding mechanisms. There's barriers around commercial and legal processes, in particular IP came up multiple occasions. But finally, a whole range of stuff around lack of knowledge, understanding, connectivity. And I think you'll see from our recommendations that's kind of the area where we intend to focus the most. And these were our four key actions that came out of our working group. And the first one was a mapping of the technical and commercial capabilities for translation. So again, we know there's a lot of things out there, commercial services, people who can run efficacy trials, transformation systems, all sorts of services that are out there in plant science. But again, are people aware of where they are and what's available? So again, we did a listing of those. And what that also showed is there's possibly some gaps as well. So again, what we want to do is then probably take that forward as part of Action 2, which was this creation of a Pathfinder service. Again, this is about knowledge and understanding. There was discussions about lots of different mechanisms of funding for translational science, but this understanding that maybe in the academic community they weren't clear and transparent. So can we bring those funding mechanisms more to those people who might be able to dip into them? But likewise, also that there's industry out there, and industry isn't probably aware of who is doing what in the academic community. So in some ways this is a bit of about a translation dating service, and that is something that's ongoing and we'll come to later. We also wanted to talk about convening a plant science meets social sciences forum. Now, part of this was about this idea that there probably is quite a lot of knowledge out there, but are we exchanging that knowledge in an appropriate way? Are we, as scientists, creating the right messages that engage with the end users, but are also delivered in the right way so they change behaviour? So again, this is where we need to get interdisciplinary, and this is where we need to talk to our social science, social research colleagues and see if they've got some help for us in the biology community. And then finally, events, looking at events to forge multidisciplinary collaborations. I mean, in particular, this was about the idea of a sandpit event. So you throw out a big question, you invite people along, and there's a pot of money, a pot of gold at the end of it, and people can sort of try and formulate ideas for that. This will probably be taken forward elsewhere, but this was something that was discussed. It has pros, it has cons, but was something was quite a keen idea. So just to summarise on where we are making the progress, the one thing was the first thing was the Pathfinder service. And this is something where the UK PSF has been engaging with others. So we've been talking to the KTN, the Plant and Crop KTN, and they have a key role in this area. And we've also been talking to others. So the National Centre for Universities and Business is a food grouping, and they've just published this report on leading food version 4. And one of the things that talks about is developing a very broad and sustainable portal for information, and that sounds very, very, very similar to the sort of thing we were talking about in the working group. So this idea is about how we can engage, and this is one of the benefits of the PSF, is how we can engage with others to learn from them and try and sort of, if you like, even steal from others where possible, rather than just recreating everything afresh. So there's progress going on that, and hopefully we can look towards developing a Pathfinder service in the future. And then also, finally, just to say the Knowledge Exchange Workshop, we're making progress with that, and we're tentatively hoping to have an event planned for early 2016. But the key thing is about bringing together the right people, plant scientists, social researchers, industry and stakeholders, but also building on previous experience. So some of the guys there, and particularly looking at people at Newcastle, for example, who've been heavily involved in things like the RELU programme and Land Bridge, we can build on them. And also, again, making this really truly cutting across the plant sciences world. So there's been a lot of work going on about social research and social science in areas like plant health, and DEFRA have been heavily involved in that. And we have got strong support from Gemma Harper, who's also the head of plant health policy within DEFRA, but also is their chief social researcher. And at that point, and the smiles from the panel would suggest that it's time for me to thank the other members of the working group and finish. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. And now we're going to ask Huw Jones to talk about the regulation working group.
So Anthea has done half of my job for me, so thank you very much for introducing the topic of regulation. So we see regulation, I think a lot of us, as in a kind of Jekyll and Hyde way, as individuals or CEOs of organizations. We see it as a hassle. We know that we're not doing anything dangerous. We know that we're not going to harm people or harm the environment. And the regulatory hurdles we have to jump over are hassles. They cost us money and time and effort. However, as consumers or at a societal level, we of course expect good regulation. We don't want to be eating food that's unsafe, and we want the environment we live in to be appropriately cared for. So it's important, and it's important because it can change what we do overnight. It has a fundamentally significant, it could have if you get things wrong. So the working group that I chaired focused on 4 areas. These were areas that we thought were topical because they were topics that were in people's minds at the time. So we considered the topic of access to genetic resources, framed under the Nagoya Protocol. Can you put your hand up if you've heard of the Nagoya Protocol? Apart from, oh wow, that's brilliant. Okay, because most people I speak to haven't heard of it, and it as UK plant scientists, it could start to limit how we act. I'll come back to that in a second. We also talked about the GM rules, and particularly the rules that haven't yet been defined yet, but we need clarity on how the new breeding technologies, particularly genome editing, will be regulated at the EU level. We also talked about plant protection products and of course, the issues of neonics and the use of hazard rather than risk to assess these. And also invasive species. There's new regulations just in the pipeline. So those were the 4 areas. I'm only going to talk about the first 2 today, because they are out of the 4. They're more topical, and I hope they're going to generate some more discussion. So in 2014 and in 2015, the UK compliance regs of the ABS rules. So this concept of access to genetic resources and how to then share the rewards of commercialization of those resources were adopted and laid into law. So, of course, at one level, this is highly laudable. If a big pharmaceutical company finds a rare plant in a native environment that can make a highly an important compound that it can sell and makes lots out of it, then it's only right that some of that reward feeds back into the communities that provided the resource. However, the awareness is low, I thought, although it's good to see that at least a third or so of the audience has heard of it before. So it's important that you are aware that if you exchange seeds or if you access this kind of material, then you need to comply with the regulations. There's still some uncertainty. It's complex. What exactly is in and out of scope, and in some senses, it could actually hinder rather than help the flow of this material. And the UK Plant Sciences Federation are in the process of, I'm looking at Mimi, of putting together a paper that describes more of this detail. I'm sure she'll come back to that. So the other one we're going to hopefully focus on is the rules and regulations, the framework surrounding the commercialization or the field use of GMOs in the EU. We largely live with the HSC contained use directive, so we understand what they are, that they cover the use of GMOs in the lab and so on. And most researchers give this a tick. They can deal with it. They know how to comply. However, the various European Union laws on how to either do a field experiment or to commercialize a new crop made using recombinant DNA technologies are largely hated by everybody. They're difficult to comply with. They're extremely expensive to comply with, and they don't work. I mean, the only GM plant for cultivation in Europe was authorized in 1998, MON 810, and since then there hasn't been a second authorization that's stuck anyway for cultivation. The timescales are long and uncertain. There is significant political input into the final authorization, and one thing that's stifling research, certainly in my lab, and I know other labs, is the uncertainty about whether genome editing, the use of these site-directed nuclease tools that can alter single or small number of nucleotides in a way that we can dictate. We've got no idea yet whether these will be considered as GMOs or not. And so, for discussion now, we can talk about how the UK Plant Sciences Federation can raise awareness and support UK scientists in compliance of these these rules. We can talk about whether the precautionary principle can or should still be used in GMO risk analysis. Is the UK approach to insecticides and other PPPs too hazard orientated, etc., etc. And I'm sure we can discuss all these things. And just to list the members of the working group, and I'll leave that on the screen as I sit down. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Huw. And now we're going to ask Stephan Kepinsky to talk about the funding working group.
Yes, thank you very much. So yes, you have me rather than Elizabeth, because Elizabeth is currently subject to PERDA, and for those of you who don't know, that's not that she's done a bad thing. It's that in this pre-election period, there are restrictions on what civil servants can and can't do. So I will be speaking on behalf of the funding group. And as you heard from Jim, we are addressing these grand challenges. I mean, these are the things that where plant science has a central role to play. We've heard about food security, not just food security, food of sufficient quality, climate change, environmental sustainability. And this is another, I realised I tried to be inclusive when I was putting slides together, and this is actually Elizabeth's slide, and I tried to tinker with it a bit to make it more inclusive, but I've left out some things here. But the main idea here is that there's an innovation chain. If we want to support the development of new technology that can address these grand challenges, then you start with very basic research at the top. Was there a pointer here? You get the picture. At the top of the diagram there, we've got basic research, crop science, and plant science. And then that feeds down closer and closer to market, the home here. And when you get to, oh, there is a pointer. Thank you. So, and when you get down here, then there's quite a pull to pull technology through. But back up here, there's more of a problem. So that's where the activities need to be funded. And Anthony mentioned research that was not pie in the sky before, but to get to that point where you have research that's not pie in the sky, you need a continual input of research up this end, at the basic end as well. So what's going on up here at this basic end? Because this takes in an awful lot of activity, and that ranges from new technological approaches to dealing with things like drought tolerance or resistance to pathogens, right through to the conservation of biodiversity. So it's really a broad range of things that are being taken in by this heading here. And so all of this costs money, and I really want to endorse everything that's been said by the other working groups. Really, these are things that we must do, but to have the people to do those things costs money, and that's not just about funding research, that's the training and all of those other things. And these are figures from the Plant Science Report, wonderful illustration of the fact that of all of the money available for public research, we're getting only around 4%. Now these are 2011 figures, but I've not noticed a doubling of plant science funding or anything. So, and then you can see that really all of the money spent on research is a rather small slice of some of the other budgets. And we identified in the working group one of the problems that we had, certainly when it comes to funding basic science, was that we are rather overly reliant, if you like, on BBSRC. So what I've listed here are these are the big funding agencies who have lots of money to distribute. There are several others, so Gatsby is also an important contributor to plant science, but in a very defined way. And over here as well, we've got very important contributions from AHDB, DEFRA, and Innovate UK. Although Innovate UK is an example there's an agency there where the funding is very close to market. So one of the issues we have is the fact that we only have really a single funder. And BBSRC worked very hard for plant science, but one of the issues that we felt was that we were sort of inhibited by the resubmission policy for BBSRC grants. So here I'm talking about basic research, the sort of research that does feed into these technological, this pipeline. And colleagues working in animal or biomedical sciences have a greater diversity of funding sources. So we came up with two really sets of recommendations. There were some near-term and ongoing activities, and they were firstly to talk to BBSSC about their resubmission policy for really top grants that were very close to being funded. And in fact, I've already spoken to Debbie about this briefly. And the other thing was that we thought it was important that, because we were, one of the things that I spoke about earlier on was the importance of having food of sufficient quality, that we could begin to approach the Wellcome Trust and Medical Research Council, or some researchers would be able to approach them with respect to producing foods of sufficient quality that are important to underpinning human health. And then the other thing that's very important, as I've said, that BBSSC do work hard for plant science, was to support advocacy at government level, to try and have some sort of way of really highlighting the fact that there is a lot being asked of plant science. If the ambition is to feed those 9 or 10 billion people by the middle of the century, then there's a lot's required from plant science. And so in order to support that sort of, this is the thing I really want, I think is really important. People I know in industry say that they want plant scientists to be doing this basic research, because that's not the sort of stuff they're going to do. And so we want it to make it easier for those in industry and other people to bring this message to government. And so this brought us to the major, the most important, I think, proposal that we put forward, which was to develop a roadmap for plant science. And the idea there is because there was really so many activities that require support, was to bring them all together in some sort of cohesive plan of a vision for what plant science capacity should be over the next 25 years, that would be something that people could get behind and could take to government and say, look, this is what we think we need. So very briefly, I guess I don't have much time at all, we want it to be very inclusive. So in this early stage, which is the stage we're at now, identifying the stakeholders, who's actually going to do this, and defining scope and boundaries. But in the development phase, we want to focus on those grand challenges, because nobody's saying they're not important. Include the breadth of plant science, and include and address a risk register. This is a exercise in identifying where we're at risk of not having capacity to, say, respond to an emergency. A new incoming pathogen, something like that. We need to have that agility. Also develop an opportunities register, things that we think where we can really make big gains in terms of food security, etc. And so I guess that's what we're going to talk about, some of what we're going to talk about now. So I'd end by thanking you for your attention, and just to thank the other members of the working group, which was chaired by Julian Marr. And so thank you.
Thank you, Stephan. Now, obviously, we're going to open up very shortly to get your views and inputs and so on. But before we do that, I'm actually going to ask Celia Knight to talk to us for a couple of minutes. One of the things we're dealing with is training and skills. And Celia is going to talk to us about the student voice on careers in plant science.
Okay, so thank you for giving me the opportunity for 2 slides and 2 minutes, and it is important to move on to the discussion. But I think what I'm going to just alert you to touches on absolutely everything else that we've covered just here. The enormity of the issues that we have to deal with are not going to be dealt with in Principal Investigator's next 3-year grant. And unless we encourage and train and give the next generation an attractive profession to join, as well as much time as possible to learn about the critical information they need to be able to be creative about these ideas, then I think we won't find solutions. So what I want to alert you to is what the Government Office of Science is doing. Led by Professor Nicholas Spence, they're reviewing UK capability in plant health, And there's a poster. Charles Lane is at the back, will wave his hand. And he has a poster which gives the background to this project, the skills pipeline. So please do speak to Charles, and I'll be at that poster as well. And I'll be able to explain a little bit more about this scoping project that I've been involved in. And it's just a pilot study, so we'd very much like to get a few more ideas and endorsements from you as to whether the views from the student population were accurate, and then see where we take them forward. So very briefly, I met with 3 groups of students and asked them all what their career aspirations were, their views on where the jobs were in plant science, and how we were currently training them. And that's it. I'm not going to talk through this. If you come to the poster, there's a handout that I'll try and encourage students, but also we're interested to hear from everybody, to hear what sort of things were really important. But ultimately, we do want to know from all of you, how can the image of plant science as a profession be improved so that we can build capability? And I think I'll just leave it there so that we can then continue.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, we have 2 handheld mics, so please wait till some nice person brings you one. Who would like to start off? So we're looking really at how can UK PSF and the plant science community, work together to take forward the recommendations that you've heard today.
So I'm Harriet Truscott from Science and Plants for Schools, and we've heard lots today about the challenges in bringing young people into the profession. I wondered what the panel thought were the big opportunities for bringing young people into the profession of plant science and inspiring them for the future.
Now, I'm not sure whether I think we should try and get a really good audience discussion, and then anyone that wants to chip in can. But if we get your views initially, I think, I'm hoping. Yes, come on, Celia, you have another go.
I'll just go back to the roadmap and just, I think it's an excellent idea. So maybe we could have a little bit more discussion on what people think about the roadmap and actually how we could fast track putting that into place.
How do we build a roadmap? What should it include?
Thank you. It's Miriam Gifford from University of Warwick. So I have two comments to make. One was on the funding side. I thought it was very interesting to see an idea of having the areas that we have risks or needs for and then opportunities, because I know, as with many people, when we write for BBSSC applications, we can quite straightforwardly address, tick food security, sustainable agriculture, but actually those aren't very specific. And so I think as a collective group, identifying areas that we could see to work in or for collaboration would be relevant. I think it's important in that section to also leave room for new direction as well. So innovation that may not necessarily have maybe at the sort of 0.1 on the scale of going from ideas to a product. The second thing I wanted to say, in terms of the getting people into plant sciences, was that the regulatory frameworks there may also be difficult. For example, risk assessments for procedures in schools. I know that simple school trips need 6 or 7 pages of risk assessment, including chance of death for climbing onto a bus. And I'm sure for experiments it's even more complex. I know Science for Schools will be helping develop that, but that's something that we could contribute to.
Thank you.
Charles Lane from Farrow. One of the things by talking to a lot of people is we talk about inspiring the next generation of plant scientists. The comeback, we always get back, so what are these jobs, where are they, and how many of them have you got?
Now, I think we should come possibly to Simon to respond to a couple of those on the opportunities for young people and the what jobs are there.
Okay, right, so I think there's a lot of opportunities, but as Hilary says, it was Hilary, wasn't it? there's a perception that it's very difficult to get out there and do things, but there are people out there who do go into schools and expose young children anyway to the beauties of invertebrates, in my case, for example. So Mini Beast Mayhem, who some of you may have come across on Twitter, she has a company, goes out into schools, and I know there's lots of those who get young people enthused. And then, of course, I think the regulations seem to kick in more as you get into secondary school, and or the testing culture gets worse, and people start to lose the chance to be enthused. And we sort of end up at my level teaching masters. We're picking up the few survivors who haven't had enthusiasm drummed out of them for the natural world, which is a shame. And there are jobs. And I think one of the problems is that those people who do get enthused into nature, for want of a better term, are getting enthused into looking at the charismatic megafauna, where there aren't that many jobs, although there's a lot of funding at certain levels. Whereas something exciting like pest management, so protecting our food crops, their industry does want people to work in that areas, but schools don't tell them about them. Most people doing undergraduate biology degrees don't know about these jobs, and I think it's somehow we've got to make sure that undergraduates are exposed to the excitement and the possibility that, yes, there is a job with a career at the end of it, rather than going and working on, just hunting dogs in the Serengeti. Get out there and look at the aphids on your roses, on your wheat plants. Look at the calendula under the ground doing the soil health. Look at the beauty of plants in general. And there are jobs. We just need them highlighted more.
Now we have someone over on the far side there.
I have to agree with you there, Simon. Certainly at Glasgow, one of the most popular biology degrees is ecology. And when I took ecology as part of one of my modules, we had one lecturer who walked out the lecture hall feeling that he'd failed miserably, because he said the one area where there is plenty of jobs guaranteed, it's not going to study the turtles or swim with dolphins, but it's studying entomology. And I think a lot of people in that room didn't see the link between studying entomology, getting a job, and why they should do it. And I think a great thing would be for universities, as well as high schools and other educations, to bring in industry or some people from industry to actually say, hey, there's more. Okay, we've got plants and we've got insects, we've got plants and there's things that you can do to actually guide them and show them the way, because I felt that one of the things lacking in my undergrads in academia was being shown where the jobs would be. But there's plenty of industry out there who would be happy to walk in and tell you where you could go and what you could do to get there, and even just open doors for things such as work placements, summer placements, whatever, to give people at a young age, in their undergrads, a better chance to explore where they would want to go.
I totally agree.
So do I. You're absolutely right. But it's not just for plant science; it's for everything. If you're, at school, you don't know how to get from where you are to that job over there. There isn't a pathway. And I would have thought for plant science, this is something that UK PSF could perhaps concentrate on providing, talking about pathways and roadmaps, something that gets you from an interest in school to a job and a career that you can see the path would be fantastic.
I guess I'll just take a very brief moment to self-advertise. So talking about ecology, I've written a blog post on mine called Pest Managers Are Ecologists Too, and explained, because people don't, undergraduates, you say pest management, they think rats, spray, and actually to be a good integrated pest manager, you've got to be an excellent ecologist. So, ecologists can go into plant science. It's not just, as you say, turtles and jungles.
Yes. Yes, there we are.
Can I just address your comment about the risks, the hurdles that schools have to jump to to risk assess experimentation to make science exciting for kids. I mean, I can see that if you hadn't gone through the process before as a teacher, it is a big, a big hurdle and a challenge. But I'm sure the HSC, and I certainly would hate to think that was depriving kids of an exciting experiment. So we ought to come up. I mean, I'm sure there are templates out there, and I'm sure there's help out there. But if there isn't, then I'm sure UK plant sciences could put something in place to help these risk assessments happen much more easily, because it oughtn't to be a barrier.
To follow up Miriam's first question, I think, was about new directions in innovation. I think that's a big challenge. It's probably a big challenge for a lot of science, not only plant science, right? Because the funding agencies fund very good science, but through a conservative mechanism. And so that there isn't really a pool of money that can be, the funding agencies are challenged with using taxpayers' money efficiently and sensibly. Whereas what we don't have in this field, other than Gatsby, but they fund again is a charitable organisations that will take the big risks that you see in medical science and such like. So that just is a kind of a world we live in. We need some benefactor to say, I'm going to put money in here, or a pool of money from government that is much more risk-taking than we're seeing at the moment. That's something that we should look at in the roadmap, probably. Can I make a comment also, sorry, about students and jobs? I mean, what we're seeing from Warwick, that people are going out during our PhD programs especially, and MSc programs, they're being picked up very, very quickly across a range of things, from industry to academia to government agencies and things like that. So what I perceive is actually well-trained people are being picked up very, very quickly. I think one thing that the community really needs to address is numeracy, because I think any student that goes out trained with high levels of statistics, mathematics, or skills to analyse data and things like that, and it doesn't just have to be genomics or physiology. I mean, sure, agronomy is building big data sets as well. All of the different skills will be data set. So data analysis and things like that, I think people will find jobs very, very quickly.
Okay, and Stephan.
Yeah, I had a couple of comments. I was going to go to funding, but I'll just about young people. I've thought a bit about this, why we have this pernicious problem of students turning up to university saying that plants are boring, which is a big problem, and I guess that some of the students that leave, who are interested in the characteristic megafauna that Simon talked about, there are more of them, and so more of them are going to be among those teachers who are then teaching children at school and being really excited about the animal. So we do need, it's essential, the work, the Gatsby and the schools projects are essential, because we need to make it easier for them to see that it's exciting, to try and break this cycle. Okay, and on funding, to follow up what Jim said, one of the things that we were very adamant about was that it's essential that we preserve the funding of basic plant science. So there is a gap between basic plant science and the nearer market investment, but we don't want, that can't be filled at the expense of funding of basic plant science, because that's where the ideas are going to come. We're looking at enormous yield gains that are required, and it's going to require ongoing technological innovation. So that's something we were very clear on.
Do you want to also reply about the risk register and the opportunities register that was raised, and areas for collaboration? Was there anything more on that?
Yeah, I just say that I think a risk, we think it's a very important thing to do, because otherwise we don't want to be caught out. And when, if something arrives in the country, I mean, it's easiest to think in these terms about pathogens that we are not ready for. Then we need to have that agility and a level of preparedness. And that, of course, because you don't know where that's coming from, that again is going to lie in basic plant science, in understanding fundamental mechanisms. And as far as opportunities for young people, well, really, that's the thing I was talking about earlier on. So, yeah.
Okay. Now, I think I saw a hand. Yes, you.
every year I'm getting or applying for summer studentships for second year into final year students from the Society for General Microbiology and the Biochemical Society. I just wanted to point out that there's not a nice place to apply for plant sciences funding, not just for our real research, but for those students to get those extra skills and that real gold plating of their CVs. That summer studentship is such a CV enhancement opportunity, and I don't know if the UK PSF could think about.
So this is sort of internships or work experience in the right field.
For 8 weeks of work over summer that pays some consumables and some travel for students, and it's peanuts really in the scheme of things, but it's such a big deal for graduating students who have had that prize.
Yeah.
Are you saying that you can only find your route through the Society of General Microbiology?
Or the Biochemical Society, it would be really nice to have a
Sure,
basic
sure. I mean, the Society of Biology does link all of the possible places you can get internships from. But
I've seen the list, but effectively plant sciences aren't really just you have to be a member, and I'm sure everybody in here will say, memberships pay so many, and there's always,
okay.
the time to the academics memberships of the societies can particularly help you with students with experience.
I think that is a different point. But there are, for the Gatsby Summer School, we do make a whole list of places that you can get bursaries. I mean, it could be from the Botanical Society of the British Isles. There are lots of places.
I've seen that list. I still think that.
You still think? Okay. There's work to do.
And also that's a cry right across the board. Everybody that's trying to get work experience would say, can we not get some companies involved, and cannot, perhaps that in exchange for support that a company gets possibly from UKTI or something, the exchange is that they have to provide some work experience or some placements. And that might be an idea to pursue. Now next I saw somebody, you want to come again?
I will put a plug in for that internship. I know it's extremely popular with students. I mean, maybe we'll get some students here who have been recipients of those. But it's a brilliant way to try and get people to have a taster of plant science. Nothing to lose from doing an internship or taking some.
Yes.
Debbie Harding, BVSRC. I think it's probably appropriate to say something about funding. Is this on?
Yes,
okay.
But not very loud.
Okay. So Jim made the point about the funding agencies having very conservative mechanisms by which they fund things. I'd just like to remind you that the funding mechanism is a committee or panel of scientists. They are basically you. So you are the people who are making those funding recommendations to us. So if you're making a lot of very conservative decisions, you maybe need to think about how you work on those committees. It's not BBSRC members like me who decide exactly what is going to be funded. It's you who make the recommendations.
Debbie, I fully agree with what you're saying, obviously, but I just think the mechanism that gets there is by nature conservative. You have the review process that is highly critical. The nature of the way we've got to in our whole, not just BBSRC committees, but all of the way we approach our reviewing of everything requires that, okay, the person's got a really good track record, yes, there's the publications, here's all the previous data, not here's a great idea, let's fund it. It would not get support. That's kind of my point, rather than I hear what you're saying.
I think that's probably the case for pretty much any area of science that you care to look at these days.
Yeah, I said that. And I wasn't pointing the finger. Okay, it's I said it was the case for everyone.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I suppose it's also worth saying that BBSRC isn't about to change the balance of funding for plant science, animal science, microbiology, etc. Whenever we get pleas for more funding into an area, the question is always, what do you want us to take that away from? Because we don't have an expanding budget. With a comprehensive spending review coming up, I think we should all keep our fingers crossed as to what we end up getting out of that. I don't see it expanding rapidly. The other question I had was, you mentioned the concept of resubmitting unsuccessful applications. I just wonder how you think it's going to help by resubmitting applications that have failed to make the grade once at a committee.
So, I mean, the point is that we need to address these problems. We need great ideas, and so you can go from, depending on what's been funded ahead of your grant, you can go from amazing champagne, we've got a grant, to, by one point, it's rubbish, never come back again. So that's the thing where we feel that other disciplines, they have a bit more flexibility to say, right, I'm gonna bang, I've heard this, I'm gonna bang it into MRC after it'd come out of Welcome or somewhere like that. And that's the thing. So what that does, because of that policy, it makes people writing grants a lot more inhibited at submitting grants. We don't submit enough grants as plant scientists, and one of the reasons is we want to make sure everything is absolutely watertight, because we know that if it goes down, we can't come back until we've done an awful lot more. So that's why I'd like to look at it. I realise that it'd be a very difficult thing to do, and it's a very unlikely thing to happen. But I think that's what we felt. We've been trying to work out why plant scientists aren't submitting as many grants as other people, and we think this could be a factor because we're relying on this single funder. I realise there's a problem there.
As somebody who's been around a long time, before the BBSRC was invented, we had a very nice plant science supporting body called the AFRC, and they did allow you to resubmit, and that allowed you to have a go at your sort of answer the referee's comments and incorporate it properly. Whereas now, with the BBSRC, you have no idea whether your response to the referees is actually being taken on board, and sometimes I feel it's totally ignored, judging by the other marks you get from the other referees. So I would certainly think a resubmission process would be useful.
Well,
one more thing.
I haven't sat on a responsive mode committee for a while, but I can assure you that your response to reviewers' comments is always taken into account, and it can absolutely sink your application or drag it into the funding area, depending on how you address those comments. So yes, it is absolutely crucial that you address those comments.
Yeah, just one very brief thing. The whole resubmission thing applies most acutely to new researchers, new investigators, because they would really benefit from being able to go back, taking on the criticisms of the whole world, because they send out to 6 reviewers sometimes, and going back. So that we would like to be able to discuss this. That's what we'd like, I think.
Okay, now let's move on. Neil at the back, can you just get the microphone up to him, please?
Neil Bragg, yes. I was just going to try and address that first comment from the audience about how do we attract people in schools. And I think we've actually dodged the issue very nicely. Rick actually did sort of allude to it in the translational part of his presentation. The point about this is, if you think about what's been going on today, we've been actually bombarded with some pretty high-level stuff at times, which I assume most of you knew what was being talked about, but I'll be honest, sometimes it went straight over the top. So how on earth do we then attract people if we can't actually speak in a language which actually is communicable to everybody? And it is a serious issue, this translation of the science. If you want to make it attractive, you need to translate it. And actually what that is a unique opportunity to bring in other skill sets which we don't have in plant sciences at the moment. So you're thinking about media, social media, and that's not something, I mean, as being a fossilized whatever, I know nothing about tweeting and things like this, but there has to be the opportunity for young people to be brought in to help us to actually communicate. And at the moment, I think we're grossly failing on that point.
Thank you. Does anyone want to respond to that one?
Yeah, I'll probably just agree. But no, I think it's a really valid point. And this whole idea, though, about interdisciplinarity, I think we talk about it, but I'm not sure how much we actually really do it. And I think, in some ways we've got to start thinking about what are the big questions and then bringing in lots of people. I mean, the discussions we are having here are obviously around a plant sciences perspective, but we've got to think about the other people who are going to help us with these big challenges are the engineers, the mathematicians, the social researchers. And it's how do we bring them in? And again, this is about flexibility on quite often on funding, I guess, as well, because you're looking at a pot and then you suddenly think, well, I'm going to share it with another community. But it is a really key thing, and I think it is important, and it is getting traction in some areas. We certainly know in plant health that it's a new pathogen arriving in the UK is not just a biological problem. And if you don't, there's a number of times we can see things have failed because we haven't engaged with the stakeholders. And if you don't bring industry, if you don't bring the general public with you, then you're not going to succeed in an eradication or a control.
Thank you. Now I'm going to get Jim wants to respond to the roadmap.
Because I think Celia asked about the roadmap, a question that hasn't been addressed, I think. So the roadmap to me is kind of critical, I think. If we need... So you can hear around here lots of different ideas and some core thinking, but what we need is an integrated document that really sort of says these are the things that we want to achieve, and this is what the plant science community buys into as a whole. And so I think getting that done, to me, is a big priority for UK PSF. And so this summer I hope that what we'll do is convene a workshop of key people to start to flesh out that and to put timelines on and actions that we really should take forward as a community. But we need to, the only way I think we can progress it is to have a reasonable small defined workshop on people who sit down for a couple of days and really go through that, what it means, rather than just a chat, a conversation. So that's what I propose we do.
Okay. Now I saw a couple more hands. We are running out of time. We've really run out of time. So I'm going to take any hands that go up right now, and then I'm going to give each of the panellists a minute. So we have one more person.
Hello, Ginny Page from Science and Plants for Schools. Just to reassure people here, very little is banned in schools, in fact. I'm not quite sure why people think it is, but it isn't. A lot of the resources that we produce for schools are about practical work. In fact, we took one on cauliflower cloning to the American Society for Plant Biology, where they were amazed that British schools did these kind of activities. They were doing them in the first year of their undergraduate teaching. So I think, don't be too worried. A note of caution in terms of the business of schools and the job of teachers these days. We'd love to think it's all about inspiring and engaging. It is the bottom line, I'm afraid, is getting teachers to perform, getting students to perform well in qualifications that matter for their accountability. So when we produce resources, we have to tie them into the curriculum. We have to make them useful for teachers. That is a bit of a bottom line for us. Your outreach is what can help inspire and add the extra messages. That's really important. But also, for those of you here teaching undergraduates involved in universities, please be loud and proud about the plant science in your degrees. One of the difficulties in talking to teachers and students about the opportunities in plant science is there's a bit of a black hole in terms of where they see the pathway going in university. They can't see plant science as a single degree, they can't see it in their biology degree. So it's very hard for us to kind of go around and say to teachers, it's really important your students study it and you engage them about it, because they can't see where it goes afterwards. So I think for everybody to be very vocal and very proud about the plant science that students will study at university, and perhaps for some work to go on to map that and to make that very public, and that it is important. And that students will be studying it when they get to university.
Thank you. And a hand just there. You're the last one from the floor, if someone can get the microphone over to you.
Thanks. Just very briefly, for those not on Twitter, we've just been tweeted to the hashtag of this conference from a student at UCL saying that apparently UCL are about to lose their only plant scientist on their faculty, and he's claiming she won't be replaced. And he's asking if we sign a petition he set up at change.org to have another plant biologist recruited at UCL. You might be interested in that.
The powers of Twitter. Okay, so I think we could go around in the reverse order, give everybody a minute. So we'll start with Stephan, if you'd like to respond to the things that you've heard.
Yes, well, I think I responded as I went along, and I think I guess the most important thing is to say that we recognise that BBSSC are not going to, for example, change the way they distribute the money. And so this is why we want to have this roadmap document as something that we can use to go to government and say, this is why we think we need more investment. So we want more money coming in the top. That's the aim. Whether or not we'll be successful, we'll see. But it's clear if there's this, to me a disconnect between the ambitions of feeding all of these people by the middle of the century and the funding at the moment. And so we will get the food security we deserve effectively. So we want to make sure that's as good as possible.
Absolutely. Right, then we come to Huw. What your take-home messages? That's what we want.
The regulatory frameworks that control our activities as plant scientists are important. They have the power to stop us working or to encourage us to aim for particular endpoints. The pipeline from concept through fundamental applied research to commercialization, if that's the simple idea of a pipeline of research turning into something that we can use, and it isn't necessarily a thing, but an idea can be used in agriculture or in pharma and so on. This takes time. It takes 10, 20, 30 years. And unless we have certainty of the regulatory frameworks, if we're uncertain about how something is going to be regulated, or if we have an idea that the seed that we took from the Amazon, 10 years ago to apply it in a way that could be then captured by a regulatory process. Although I think the Nagoya Protocol is not retrospective, actually, so that shouldn't be a problem. But anyway, regulations, we ought to do what we can to make regulations work for us and to make them proportional. The work we need to do to comply needs to be proportional to the risks that are out there. And at the moment, there are some that are clearly not, that are out of kilter.
Right, Rick.
I guess it's just an appeal for, in a community, I suppose, that's very heavily represented by basic plant research. If you want to sort of encourage people into that area, remember there's lots of areas outside of that as well. Some of those job opportunities are in plant health, they're in forestry, they're in other areas beyond an academic research career. So that's the challenge, and that's where the benefit of the Plant Sciences Federation is, because it's all encompassing, and remembering that plants exist beyond the laboratory.
And then Simon.
Okay, so I think there are a lot of inspirational and imaginative teachers out there, both from primary through to higher education. But I think one of the problems that's happened over the last few years is that the way universities have been funded is that there hasn't been an encouragement for the more, I guess, applied and whole organism people to be retained. See plant sciences losing at UCL. Imperial got rid of plant sciences in a big swathe a few years ago. And I think it's really important that we try to get the people enthused at lower levels to show there is a demand for that sort of teaching, that people actually want to learn about the environment and the whole organisms. They don't all want to be in front of a computer. So in some ways it's a bit gloomy, but I'm trying my best, but I'm quite old. And I'd like to think that younger people would put pressure somewhere, and that the UK PSF can put pressure, and the industry can put pressure on universities to bring back that sort of teaching.
Thank you. Well, our time has drawn to a close. What I've been very struck with is how much there are similarities between, if I can call it, your industry and others. So the huge need for work experience and internships, and for plant science students to get those opportunities. I hear that in other areas of industry, and I think that there must be a way for you to share experience. The EEF, for example, have similar problems and have reached sort of conclusions. So I think cross-fertilization might help. But the real message, I think, was the need for good communicators. And that's always, I was more of a techie to start with. I think that the need to be able to communicate what you're doing and why it's important is a major message that I'm taking away from this day. The link from what you do at school to a good, worthwhile career, how you get from A to B. The need for plant scientists to be vocal and proud. I love that message. And I think, obviously, in a short session like this, we can't develop a roadmap. But I think if all of you can engage and help to achieve these objectives by working with the UK PSF. That will be hugely appreciated. And do contact Mimi Tanimoto if you want to be involved. She's very keen to hear from you. So thank you all very much. Very good.